I'm in the middle of cutting the strips for the 2025 Quilt of Valor log cabin block, and I didn't plan things out very well, which happens sometimes with scrappy projects. I'm going through my stash and just finding some strips, and I'll point out on the pattern where I went wrong, but let me show you what I have so far. We're going to start with the red squares, and then I have my white strips ready to go for round one and some blue to go for round one. So this is how that first part will go. And then I chose another white for round two, and then I'm doing the scrappy version, so we've got our next round of red. And that's as far as I've gotten right now. We'll continue adding one more round, so I need another white, and then it finishes in blue, which will be this dark. So that gives me a couple blocks cut out. You can see I was just using a little bit that I had that worked. These are all 2-inch strips. Now, if you're working from scraps, what I recommend is always cut the longer piece first, because the log cabin has that stair step effect. And if you cut some of the longer pieces, then you'll always be able to get smaller pieces from the leftovers. Whereas if you start with the short piece, you may not have enough to get the longer piece from whatever you're left with at the end of the strip. So let's look at the log cabin quilt patterns. Let's see what Quilts of Valor has for us for 2025. On the website QOVF.org, you can scroll down and see the block of the year is the log cabin. So on this page, you can see they've got 3 different colorways. I love this scrappy red and blue option that alternates with the colors. And the designer, Nancy, has put together 12 different patterns with this block. So let's take a look at those. They will be updating this page with the different blocks that are collected if you mail them to the national organization. I like to just make the block and donate locally, but you can see they've got 3 different color options there, and these 12 different layouts. I'm reading from the website. You can do a barn raising pattern, which is pretty traditional, with a square in the center, and then it kind of ripples outward. The heart in the cabin uses the log cabins to make a heart shape in the quilt. I think that's really nice. Next is field and furrows, another traditional layout for the log cabin, turning them to put them on the diagonal and make some stripes. And then the medallion star. I love this layout. You turn the log cabin blocks to make this 8-point star, and then they've added some rows to extend that and kind of frame that star shape in the quilt. And I think that is so gorgeous. We have medallions in gold, and that just puts the log cabin into a block or into a bubble layout. This is actually very similar to my jelly chain pattern. So a lot of fun there with the log cabin blocks. Just a straight medallion, different colorway here. So you can see the different variations with the red and the blue. Mountains and valleys, you can make chevron type rows with your log cabin blocks. And because of their design, with the stark contrast between half the block is light and half the block is dark, you can use log cabin blocks in any pattern where you would use a half square triangle. So it makes these chevrons really fun across your quilt just by turning the log cabins. Parade rest is a combination quilt because you have a traditional quilt star in the center with some nice sashing around it, and then the log cabin blocks there frame that center star very nicely. That pattern is called Parade Rest. We have Pinwheel Star, and again, turning those log cabins around to make that pinwheel in the center. So very similar to the Medallion Star, but just with a pinwheel in the center and those same diagonal rows in the corners to frame that design. Very lovely. Star in the middle is another combination of a different classic quilted star and then some extended star points with the log cabin blocks. So that's a lot of fun. And the last one is called Welcome Home. And this puts a pieced house block in the center with these field and furrow block layouts for the diagonal frame around your house. So that is a very pretty traditional design if you wanted to expand from the log cabin to some other quilted elements there. I am going to work on the Medallion Star. And the first thing I would recommend is coming up to the basic instructions for your quilt block. And this lays out the 13 pieces that you need for your quilt. So what I did was I just sketched a log cabin block and labeled the pieces the way I need it to make this scrappy red and blue version. And then I can go down the list and make sure I cut the correct size for the correct color. Now notice, for instance, color 2 could be white or cream, but then color 4 is either light blue or soft red. So that depends on which block you are making. So the way these colors would work for the blue log cabin, you start with the red center, number 1. Rows 2 and 3 are white. So they're going to the bottom and then counterclockwise around the square to the light blue, and then the white, and then the medium blue, and then the white, and then the dark blue. And they just reverse that for the red, and then again for the scrappy. So it really helped for me to take this block diagram and put the numbers in, because I ended up cutting some pieces wrong because I was following the red that was listed for pieces 4 and 5 when actually I should have been paying attention to the blue diagram. So just get your plan in mind first for the colors and the sizes you need before you start cutting. So since I have some extra red units, I'll have to make some extra blocks and send them off to the national organization. So let's put this block together. So you want to get everything organized when you are ready to sew your block, and you can do it in a linear fashion so that we would sew our first white and just continue as the strips get longer, keep adding them around our center square. It just makes more sense to me to have the whole block laid out, so I'll show you that method. And here is the actual layout of the block, and this is how I like to have my pieces set up before I put everything together. I like to have the whole block laid out the way it's going to be sewn together. So again, we're going to start with the center square. We're going to work in a spiral. So I'm going to add the shortest white, and I always remember that I have 2 whites and then 2 of the darks. So I'm going to go white, white, blue, blue, and then the next white piece, whites always touch whites, and then my red is going to touch my blue, longer red here, and then I'm back to white touching white, white touching white, blue touching blue, and blue touching red, but it's on the dark side of the block. So you want to keep your orientation always, it's really easy to think that it's time to sew this on this side, and then you get yourself off the rotation of the block. But just remember that you have to spiral around and have similar colors touching. And we're ready to sew. Round 1 is finished. I've covered all 4 sides of my square, so then I come back to my shortest white piece and start round 2. Since I am chain piecing only 2 blocks, I don't want to keep getting up to the iron. So I am finger pressing each seam away from the center square. When I finish, I will, of course, press all of my blocks, trim them to size, but chain piecing and finger pressing help maximize my sewing time. And log cabin blocks are really fun because you don't have to pin anything as you work your way around the block. And here is block 2. We've got 2 pieces on all 4 sides, and so then we can just rotate and start round 3. All done. Finger press this last seam, and of course I will press all these and double check that they are the correct measurement. That is the 2025 log cabin block for Quilts of Valor. I'll be working on more log cabin blocks to finish the medallion star for the 2025 Quilts of Valor block drive. I'd love to hear what you're working on. Please leave a comment below and tell me about your quilt projects. If you need more inspiration for Quilts of Valor, please watch this video next.